My name is Sarah. I'm 32, and I thought sacrificing my first baby for our future was the hardest thing I'd ever do. 4 years ago, I miscarried during a crucial promotion cycle because I couldn't bear to slow down when my career was finally taking off. The doctors said I might never conceive again. My husband David held me while I grieved, promising that we would build something beautiful together, even if children weren't in our cards. So when I stared at those 2 pink lines last month, a miracle pregnancy after years of specialists and disappointment, I could barely contain my joy. I was finally going to give David the family he'd always wanted, the child I'd failed to protect before. But tonight, walking into our Seattle apartment after closing the biggest deal of my career, I found a yellow floral dress draped over our couch, size 4T. David wasn't home yet, but there was a receipt on the counter from Westfield Mall, timestamped just hours ago. David, the man who'd held me through countless negative pregnancy tests, had been shopping for a little girl who, according to the credit card statement I found buried in his desk drawer, had been receiving gifts, clothes, and birthday parties for the past 4 years, while I'd been mourning the child we lost. He'd been raising the one I never knew existed. David and I had been together for nearly 10 years, married for 7. I'd built myself into one of the youngest senior marketing directors at Pinnacle Global, a Fortune 500 consulting firm with offices across 3 continents. David taught physics at Lincoln High School, a job he genuinely loved despite the modest salary. I made enough money for both of us. David's teacher salary barely covered the groceries, but I'd never minded. He took care of our home, cooked my favorite meals, and supported my demanding career with the quiet devotion of someone who understood that success required sacrifice, or so I'd thought. The yellow dress was still there when I returned from the kitchen with a glass of water, the pregnancy nausea making everything smell too strong, too overwhelming. I picked up the tiny garment, running my fingers over the soft cotton fabric. Butterflies and daisies danced across a pale yellow background, the kind of dress I might have chosen for a daughter of my own. My phone buzzed with a text from Michelle, my best friend since college. "How did the Morrison Group presentation go? You've been radio silent all day." I stared at the message, trying to remember the presentation that had consumed my morning. The Morrison Group contract, worth $3 million in annual revenue, the kind of deal that would secure my promotion to regional director. I'd nailed every slide, answered every question, watched the clients nod with increasing enthusiasm. I'd been celebrating with the team when the pregnancy symptoms hit. Morning sickness that lasted all day. The exhaustion that made me want to curl up under my desk. I'd made excuses about food poisoning and left early, driving home with my mind already racing toward the conversation I planned to have with David. I'm pregnant. I'd practiced saying in the car, after 4 years, we're finally having a baby. Instead, I was standing in our living room, holding evidence that David had been living an entirely different life. I typed back to Michelle, "Presentation went great. Something's come up at home. I'll call you tomorrow." I set the phone down and walked to David's desk, a sleek IKEA piece we'd assembled together during our first year in the apartment. I'd never gone through his papers before I respected privacy, trusted completely. Now I pulled out each drawer systematically, looking for explanations I wasn't sure I wanted to find. The credit card statements were in the bottom drawer, filed with David's characteristic organization. I spread them across the desk surface, scanning the charges from the past 6 months. Target, $127. 43. Children's clothing department, Party City, $89. 27. Birthday decorations, Chuck E. Cheese, $156. 78. Party package for 12 Amazon, $67. 23. Pink bicycle, age 3-5 Toys R Us, $234. 55. Various toys and games. My hands trembled as I traced the pattern backwards through months of statements. Birthday parties, Christmas gifts, back-to-school clothes, an entire childhood subsidized by my salary while I struggled through fertility treatments and hormone injections. The front door opened just as I was photographing the last statement with my phone. Sarah, you're home early. David's voice carried from the entryway, warm with the same affection I'd fallen in love with in college. I brought Chinese from that place, you like. I carefully replaced the statements in their drawer and walked to the living room, where David was setting takeout containers on our dining table. He looked exactly as he always did, wire-rimmed glasses slightly askew, dark hair mussed from the Seattle wind. Wearing the navy sweater I'd bought him for Christmas. David, I said, holding up the yellow dress, what is this? His face went through a series of micro-expressions I'd never seen before: surprise, guilt, calculation, and finally resignation. Sarah, let me explain. Please do. I sat down across from him, the dress still in my lap, because I'm having trouble understanding why my husband is buying clothes for a 4-year-old girl. David rubbed his temples, a gesture I recognized from the nights he graded particularly difficult exams. It's complicated, uncomplicated. Do you remember Jessica Martinez? She was one of my students about 5 years ago. Brilliant kid, really gifted in physics, but her home situation was... He paused. Her father was in prison. Her mother worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. Jessica was doing homework in restaurant booths because they didn't have heat at home. I nodded slowly. David had always been the teacher who stayed late to help struggling students, who bought lunch for kids who couldn't afford it. I'd admired his compassion, even contributed money when he wanted to help a particularly needy family. Jessica was special. David continued, his voice taking on the tone he used when talking about his favorite students. She had this incredible mind for physics, could see patterns other students missed. I tutored her after school, helped her apply for scholarships. She got into University of Washington on a full ride. That's wonderful, I said carefully. What does this have to do with the dress? David's hands fidgeted with his chopsticks. Jessica graduated from UW 3 years ago. She's working as a lab technician now, doing well for herself. But she had a baby during college, a little girl named Emma. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Emma? The father disappeared when Jessica found out she was pregnant. She almost dropped out, but I helped her find childcare. I helped with some expenses. She's like family to me. Sarah, I watched her grow from this scared, brilliant kid into a strong woman and mother. So you buy Emma birthday presents. Jessica doesn't have family here. Emma needed. He trailed off, seeming to realize how the explanation was landing. Sarah, you have to understand. I never meant for this to interfere with our life. It's just helping out a former student. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline, where lights were beginning to twinkle in the early November darkness. I thought about the credit card statements, the systematic pattern of expenses spanning years. David, how old is Emma? She just turned 4. And when did Jessica get pregnant? A long pause. During her senior year at UW, I did the math in my head. Jessica's senior year would have been 5 years ago. Emma was 4 years old, which meant Jessica had gotten pregnant around the same time I was grieving my miscarriage. When David was promising me that we would face our childless future together, "David," I said quietly, "show me a picture of Emma." "Sarah, I don't think show me a picture of Emma." With obvious reluctance, David pulled out his phone and scrolled through his photos. He handed the phone to me with the expression of someone confessing to a crime. The little girl on the screen had David's dark hair, his serious dark eyes, and his distinctive cleft chin. Emma was wearing a pink dress and laughing at something off camera, her small hands reaching toward whoever was taking the photo. I stared at the image for a long time, memorizing every detail of the child who looked exactly like David would have looked at 4 years old. "She's your daughter," I said. "Sarah, don't lie to me anymore." My voice was steady, but I could feel something breaking apart inside my chest. "Emma is your daughter. You've been supporting your daughter and her mother for 4 years while telling me we couldn't have children." His face crumpled. "It wasn't supposed to happen. Jessica was so young, and I was her teacher, and I knew it was wrong. But you did it anyway. It was just once. Sarah, one time when Jessica was upset about her mother being evicted, and I was trying to comfort her, and things got out of hand. I immediately told her it could never happen again, but she was already pregnant. She didn't tell me until after she graduated. By then, you and I were trying to have a baby, and I thought maybe we could be the family Emma needed. But when you miscarried, I felt like I was watching this conversation happen to someone else. The woman whose husband had just confessed to impregnating his teenage student while they were trying to conceive. The woman who had sacrificed her first pregnancy for a career advancement that would support a family that already existed without her. How much money have you spent on them? Sarah, please, how much of my money have you spent on your other family? David was crying now, which I'd only seen twice in our 10 years together. Maybe 15,000 over the years. 20. I know it sounds like a lot, but Emma needed clothes and toys and $20,000. I set his phone on the coffee table with deliberate precision. You've spent $20,000 of my salary supporting the child you had with your student, while I went through fertility treatments trying to give you what you already had. Sarah, I love you. Jessica and Emma. They're not my real family. You're my real family. I just couldn't abandon them. I walked to the bedroom and pulled my overnight bag from the closet. As I packed, I thought about the pregnancy test sitting in the bathroom drawer. The positive result I'd been so excited to share. I thought about the Morrison Group presentation, the promotion I'd earned through years of 60-hour weeks and missed dinners and the sacrifice of the child I'd wanted so desperately. Where are you going? David followed me to the bedroom. His voice panicked. To Michelle's house. Sarah, please don't do this. We can work through this. Jessica can move away. I'll stop seeing Emma. We can start fresh with our baby. I stopped packing and looked at him directly. Our baby, the baby you're carrying, I know you're pregnant. Sarah, I've been waiting for you to tell me. I zipped the overnight bag and slung it over my shoulder. David, there is no baby. Not anymore. I walked past him toward the front door, leaving him standing in our bedroom with the yellow dress still crumpled on the floor where I'd dropped it. Tomorrow, I would make appointments with a doctor, with a lawyer, with anyone who could help me untangle the life I'd built with a man who had been living a lie for 5 years. Tonight, I just needed to be somewhere David's voice couldn't reach me, where I could begin to understand how completely I'd been betrayed by the person I trusted most in the world. Michelle lived in a converted loft in Capitol Hill, the kind of trendy space that cost twice what David and I paid for our downtown apartment, but felt worth every penny for the exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows. Michelle worked as a software engineer for Amazon, made excellent money, and had the enviable problem of too many dating options rather than too few. I'd called Michelle from the parking garage of our building, managing only to say I need somewhere to stay tonight before my voice broke completely. Now I sat on Michelle's oversized couch with a mug of chamomile tea, watching her pace the hardwood floors in fuzzy slippers and paint-stained sweatpants. "Let me get this straight," Michelle said, holding up one finger. "David, your devoted husband of 7 years, has been secretly supporting his illegitimate 4-year-old daughter while you went through fertility treatments." "That's correct. And you found out because he left a toddler dress on your couch, like some kind of deranged breadcrumb." "Also correct." Michelle stopped pacing and stared at me. "How are you so calm right now? I would be setting things on fire." I took a sip of tea and considered the question. "I think I'm in shock. This morning I was planning to tell David I'm pregnant with the miracle baby we've wanted for 4 years. Tonight I'm discovering he already has the family he wanted, just with someone else." "Wait." Michelle sat down heavily on the coffee table across from me. "You're pregnant, Sarah. That's huge. That's incredible. After everything you've been through, I was pregnant." I set down the mug and met her eyes. "I have an appointment tomorrow morning at Swedish Medical Center. I'm terminating the pregnancy." Michelle's face went through the same progression of emotions I'd been cycling through for the past 3 hours: shock, denial, anger, and finally a kind of fierce protective rage. "Sarah, I know you're hurt, but don't make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. You've wanted a baby for so long. I wanted a baby with my husband. I wanted to build a family with someone who was committed to building that family with me." My voice was steady, but I could feel the grief underneath the words. "I don't want to be a single mother trying to co-parent with a man who's been lying to me for 5 years. David could change. He could cut ties with Jessica and Emma. Focus on you and your baby, Michelle. David has a 4-year-old daughter. Emma didn't choose to be born into this situation. Even if I could forgive David for the affair, even if I could trust him again, which I can't, I won't be responsible for separating a father from his child." Michelle was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "So you're getting divorced?" "I'm getting divorced. And you're terminating a pregnancy you've wanted for years. I'm making the choice I should have made 4 years ago when I was so focused on my career that I worked through a miscarriage." I pulled out my phone and showed Michelle the photo of Emma that David had reluctantly shared. "Look at her. Michelle. She looks exactly like David. This isn't some fling that went wrong. He's been playing house with Jessica for years while I played the devoted wife who couldn't give him children." Michelle studied the photo, her expression darkening. "How old was Jessica when this started?" "She was David's student. She would have been 20, maybe 21 when Emma was conceived." "Jesus Christ. Sarah, do you realize what this means?" David was in a position of authority over Jessica. This wasn't just an affair, this was an abuse of power. I'd been so focused on the personal betrayal that I hadn't fully considered the professional implications. David, trusted high school teacher, had gotten his former student pregnant and then spent years supporting their secret family. "I need to see them together," I said suddenly. "What?" "David and Jessica and Emma, I need to see how they interact. How long this has really been going on. He could still be lying about the timeline, about how serious the relationship is. Michelle looked at me with concern. Sarah, what are you planning? I'm planning to get the full truth before I blow up my entire life. David has been playing chess while I've been playing checkers. I need to understand the game before I make my next move. I pulled up the credit card statements I'd photographed earlier. Scrolling through months of charges, look at this pattern. Michelle. Regular payments to the same grocery store, the same pediatrician, the same daycare. This isn't just helping out a former student. This is co-parenting. Have you called a lawyer? Not yet. I want to gather evidence first. If this goes to divorce court, I want documentation of everything, the financial support, the timeline, the fact that he used marital assets to support his affair partner and their child. Michelle's software engineer brain kicked into problem-solving mode. What kind of evidence do you need? Photos, bank records, anything that proves how long this has been going on and how much money was involved. I also want to know if there are other students. If David did this once, he might have done it before. Sarah, this is starting to sound like you're planning to destroy David's life. I thought about the $20,000 David had spent on Emma. Money that could have paid for fertility treatments or adoption fees or any number of ways to build the family David and I had supposedly wanted together. I thought about the nights I'd blamed myself for the miscarriage, wondering if I'd been too ambitious, too career-focused, too selfish to deserve motherhood. David destroyed his own life when he decided to impregnate his student and lie about it for 5 years. I'm just planning to make sure he faces the consequences. I stood up and walked to Michelle's window, looking out at the Seattle night, somewhere in this city. Jessica was probably putting Emma to bed. Maybe reading the same bedtime stories David had once talked about reading to the children we would have together. I need your help, I said. Anything? Can you take tomorrow afternoon off? I want to follow David after school, see where he goes, who he sees. I need to understand how deep this goes. Michelle was quiet for a moment. Sarah, are you sure about this? Once you go down this road, there's no coming back. You'll know things you can't unknow. I touched my still flat stomach, where a cluster of cells was growing into the child I'd dreamed about for years. The child I would never meet because I refused to bring a baby into this wreckage of lies and betrayal. I already know things I can't unknow. Now I need to know everything. We spent the next hour planning what Michelle called Operation Sunlight, a systematic investigation into David's double life. Michelle would handle the digital forensics, using her tech skills to recover deleted messages and trace financial transactions. I would handle surveillance and documentation. By midnight, we had a plan that would either prove David was telling the truth about the scope of his relationship with Jessica and Emma, or reveal that my marriage had been even more of a lie than I already suspected. As I settled into Michelle's guest room, I allowed myself one moment of grief for the future I was choosing to abandon. The baby clothes I would never buy, the family photos I would never take, the bedtime stories I would never read. But I'd learned something crucial about myself over the past few hours. I was not the kind of woman who accepted betrayal quietly. I was not the kind of woman who played the fool while David built a life with someone else using my money and trust. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of taking back control of my life. And if that process destroyed David's reputation, career, and carefully constructed double life in the process, well, he should have thought about that before he decided to treat me like a convenient cover story for the family he really wanted. I fell asleep planning my divorce strategy and woke up planning David's professional ruin. Both felt like the most honest work I'd done in years, The appointment at Swedish Medical Center took 23 minutes. I'd expected more ceremony around ending a pregnancy I'd wanted so desperately. But the medical termination was efficient, clinical, and surprisingly painless. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, asked twice if I was certain about my decision. I'm certain I'd said both times, though the certainty felt like a steel shell around something much more fragile. Michelle drove me home afterward, not to David and my apartment, but to her loft, where I'd spent the night answering David's increasingly frantic text messages with strategic silence. "David, please come home. We need to talk about this. David, I know you're angry, but don't make decisions you'll regret. David. Sarah, I'm scared. Please just tell me you're safe. David. I love you. We can fix this." I showed the messages to Michelle as we sat in the Swedish Medical Center parking lot. "David's scared. I'm going to expose him. Are you? Eventually. But first, I want to see them together. I want to understand what he's been choosing over our marriage." We drove to Lincoln High School, arriving just as the final bell rang and students began streaming out of the brick building. Michelle and I parked across the street with a clear view of the faculty exit. David emerged at 3:47 p.m., carrying his familiar leather messenger bag and walking with the quick, purposeful stride I knew well. But instead of heading toward the parking lot where he usually left his Honda Civic, he walked in the opposite direction, toward the bus stop. "He's not driving home," Michelle observed. I pulled out the small digital camera Michelle had borrowed from a photographer friend. "No, he's not." We followed David's bus route from a safe distance, watching as he transferred twice before getting off in Wallingford, a neighborhood of modest craftsman houses and young families. David walked 4 blocks to a pale blue house with a small front yard and a tricycle on the porch. He used a key to let himself in. "He has a key," I said quietly, snapping photos through the telephoto lens. "Sarah, are you okay?" I wasn't okay. I was watching my husband use a key to enter another woman's house like he belonged there, like he'd been doing this so many times that he didn't need to knock or wait to be invited in. But I was also filled with a cold, focused anger that felt surprisingly energizing. "I'm perfect. Keep the car running." I walked across the street and approached the house from an angle that let me see through the large front window. The living room was small but cheerfully decorated, with children's toys scattered across a colorful rug and family photos clustered on the mantelpiece. Through the window, I could see David sitting on the couch with Emma on his lap. Emma was wearing the yellow dress from the night before, and David was reading to her from a picture book. Jessica sat beside them, her hand resting on David's shoulder with the casual intimacy of a long-established couple. I took photos systematically, documenting the scene that looked exactly like the family life David and I had talked about building together. David's expression was relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen in years. He looked like he belonged there. Jessica was beautiful in the wholesome way of natural brunettes who didn't need makeup to look put together. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, with a kind of easy smile that suggested someone who had never had to fight for anything important. She wore jeans and a sweater that probably cost less than my work blouses, but she looked content in a way that made me feel overdressed in my corporate armor. Emma looked up from the book and said something that made David laugh. He kissed the top of Emma's head with automatic affection, the gesture of a father who had done this thousands of times before. I lowered the camera and stood in Jessica's front yard, processing what I was seeing. This wasn't the guilty, secretive relationship David had described. This was a family. David had been living a double life so completely that he had two homes, two families, two completely different versions of himself. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Where are you?" "I'm worried about you. Please come home so we can talk." I looked through the window again, where David was now helping Emma build something with colorful blocks, while Jessica watched them with obvious affection. David's phone was sitting on the coffee table, ignored. I walked back to Michelle's car, my mind already racing through the implications of what I'd discovered. "How bad?" Michelle asked as I got back in the passenger seat. "It's not an affair. It's a marriage. He's been living as Jessica's partner and Emma's father for years. He has a key. He's comfortable there. Emma treats him like her father because he is her father in every way that matters. Jesus. We need to see more. I want to know his routine, how often he comes here, whether he spends nights here. I want to document everything." We spent the next 3 hours parked strategically around Jessica's neighborhood, watching as David helped Emma ride the tricycle in the front yard, played fetch with a small dog that clearly knew him well, and eventually carried grocery bags in from Jessica's car like he lived there. At 7:30 p.m., David kissed Jessica goodbye, not a quick peck, but the lingering kiss of established lovers, and left to catch the bus back to downtown Seattle. Michelle and I followed the bus route back to our apartment building, where David's Honda Civic had been parked all day. He'd taken public transportation to visit Jessica and Emma, probably to avoid creating a paper trail of mileage and gas receipts that I might notice. He's been planning this deception for years, I said as we watched David enter the building. Every detail is calculated to keep me from finding out. "What's your next move?" I thought about the photos on Michelle's camera, the key David carried to another woman's house, the routine that suggested he spent significant time with Jessica and Emma, while I worked late to support the lifestyle that made his double life possible. Tomorrow I'm calling Attorney Williams. I want to understand my options for divorce proceedings and what kind of evidence I'll need to protect my assets. And then I'm going to give David enough rope to hang himself with. I want him to lie to me more, to dig the hole deeper. The more he lies now, the stronger my position will be later. My phone rang with a call from David. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker. "Sarah, I'm really worried about you. You haven't been home since last night. You're not answering my calls. Please just tell me you're okay. I know you're angry about Emma, but we can work through this. I love you, and I want to fix this. Please come home so we can talk." The desperation in David's voice might have moved me 24 hours ago. Now it just sounded like the manipulation of someone who was afraid of losing control of the narrative. He's going to try to convince me that what I saw last night was a one-time thing, that his relationship with Jessica is just about helping a former student. I said, he's going to minimize and deflect and try to make me feel guilty for not being understanding enough. "Are you going to let him?" I smiled, and it felt sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm going to let him talk himself into a corner. I'm going to be the understanding wife who forgives too easily, who wants to work things out. And while he's feeling safe and forgiven, I'm going to document everything he does, everyone he sees, every lie he tells. And then I'm going to destroy his life with the same systematic planning he used to build this deception. He thinks I'm the kind of woman who accepts betrayal quietly because I'm too invested in the marriage to walk away." I looked up at the windows of the apartment where David was probably pacing, wondering where I'd gone and how much I knew. David is about to learn exactly what kind of woman I really am. I returned to the apartment the next evening carrying takeout from David's favorite Thai restaurant and wearing the expression of someone who had spent 36 hours thinking and was ready to be reasonable. David met me at the door with the grateful relief of a man who had been preparing for disaster and found forgiveness instead. "Sarah, thank God. I was so worried. Where have you been?" "At Michelle's, thinking about everything you told me." I set the food on our dining table and began unpacking containers with deliberate calm. I needed space to process, but I'm ready to talk now. David watched my movements with careful attention, clearly trying to gauge my mood. Are you okay? You seem different." "I'm clearer about things." "Sit down." "David, let's eat and talk." We settled into our usual spots at the table, but nothing felt usual. David picked at his pad thai while I ate with apparent appetite, and the silence stretched until David couldn't stand it anymore. "Sarah, I know you must hate me right now. What I did with Jessica was unforgivable, and I've been carrying this guilt for years. But I want you to know that you're the most important person in my life. You're my wife, my partner, my best friend. Jessica and Emma, they're a responsibility I can't abandon, but they're not my real family." I looked up from my green curry. "Tell me about Emma. What do you want to know?" "Everything. When was Emma born? What's she like? How often do you see her?" David shifted uncomfortably. "Emma was born in January 2020. She's incredible. Sarah. She's smart like Jessica, but she has this sense of humor that just lights up every room. She loves dinosaurs and pizza and this stuffed elephant named Mr. Peanuts." Despite everything, I could hear the genuine love in David's voice when he talked about Emma. He wasn't faking his affection for this child, which somehow made the betrayal worse. "How often do you see her?" "Maybe once a week. Sometimes twice, if Jessica needs help with something." I know it sounds like a lot, but Emma doesn't have any other father figure, and Jessica's been struggling financially. "David, show me Emma's birth certificate." The request clearly caught him off guard. "What? If Emma is your daughter, your name would be on her birth certificate. I want to see it." His face flushed. "Sarah, I don't think Jessica would be comfortable, David. If we're going to work through this, I need to understand the full scope of your legal and financial obligations. If you're legally recognized as Emma's father, that affects our marriage, our finances, our future. I need to see the birth certificate." My tone was reasonable, business-like, the voice I used in negotiations when I needed information but didn't want to reveal my strategy. David seemed relieved by my practical approach. "I'll ask Jessica for a copy," he said finally. "Thank you. I also want to meet them. Meet them. David, if Emma is going to be part of our lives going forward, I should meet her and Jessica. I should understand who they are, what they need from you, how we can handle this situation in a way that works for everyone." David stared at me as if I'd suggested something impossible. "You want to meet Jessica and Emma? I'm not thrilled about it, but I'm trying to be mature about a complicated situation. If you have a daughter, David, I need to know how that affects our marriage and our future children." Our future children. I'd been wondering when David would ask about the pregnancy. I had a miscarriage. "David, yesterday, the stress of finding out about Emma, the emotional shock, I lost the baby." His face crumpled with grief that looked genuine. "Sarah, no, oh God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. It's not your fault," I said, which was technically true, But it does mean we need to be very careful about how we handle this situation going forward. I can't go through another loss like that. David reached across the table and took my hand. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I know how much that pregnancy meant to you, to both of us. I let him hold my hand while I studied his face. He genuinely believed I'd miscarried because of the stress of discovering Emma's existence. He had no idea I'd made a deliberate choice to terminate the pregnancy, which meant he also had no idea how much I already knew about his double life. I want to meet them this weekend, I said. I want to see where Jessica lives, meet Emma, understand what kind of relationship you have with them. If we're going to make our marriage work, I need complete honesty about everything. Sarah, are you sure? This is really mature of you, but I don't want you to put yourself through something painful just to prove a point. David, I'm not trying to prove a point. I'm trying to save our marriage. But I can't save something I don't fully understand. David squeezed my hand. Okay, I'll talk to Jessica about arranging a meeting. But Sarah, you have to promise me you'll tell me if this becomes too much for you. I don't want to lose you because I'm trying to do right by Emma. I promise. My voice was steady, warm, exactly the tone of a wife who was working hard to be understanding. David, there's something else we need to discuss. Anything. The money. I saw the credit card statements. How much have you spent supporting Jessica and Emma over the years? His hand went still on mine. Sarah, I know it looks bad. I'm not angry about the money. David, well, I'm a little angry that you didn't discuss it with me first. But I understand why you felt you had to help them. What I need to know is the total amount, so I can plan our finances going forward. David looked surprised by my pragmatic response. Maybe $25,000 over 5 years. It's hard to calculate exactly $25,000. I made a mental note to check that figure against the actual credit card records. David, that's not sustainable long-term. If we're going to support Emma, we need to budget for it properly. You're talking like you're accepting that Emma is going to be part of our lives. Emma is your daughter. David, of course, she's going to be part of our lives. The question is how we handle that responsibly. David's relief was so obvious it was almost painful to watch. He'd been bracing for me to demand that he choose between me and Emma. And instead I was talking about integration and budgeting. Sarah, I don't deserve you, he said. I know I've handled this terribly, keeping secrets, lying to you. But if you can forgive me, if we can work through this together, we can work through this. I said, but I need complete honesty from now on. No more secrets, no more lies. If I'm going to help you be a good father to Emma, I need to know everything. Everything, I promise. I smiled at him with what looked like genuine warmth. Good. Now tell me about Jessica. How is she handling all of this? It must be hard for her. Being a single mother, Jessica's been amazing. Actually, she never asked me to leave you or demanded more than I could give. She understands that my marriage comes first. That what we have is complicated. What exactly do you have? David, he hesitated. We're friends. Close friends who share a daughter. She knows I love you, that I'm committed to our marriage. We've never talked about anything permanent between us. I nodded thoughtfully, and Jessica is okay with that. She doesn't want more from you. She's very independent. She has her own career, her own life. She just wanted Emma to have a father figure. The lies came so easily from David that I wondered if he even recognized them as lies anymore. He'd constructed an entire alternate reality where he was nobly sacrificing for a disadvantaged former student while maintaining primary loyalty to me. "I'd like to bring Emma a gift when we meet," I said. "What does she like?" "She loves art supplies. She's always drawing and painting. And she's obsessed with this animated movie about dragons. She watches it constantly." I made mental notes about Emma's interests while maintaining my expression of supportive curiosity. "And Jessica, what should I know about her to make this meeting go smoothly?" She's very sweet, very genuine. She doesn't have a lot of experience with complicated social situations, so she might be nervous about meeting you. But she respects our marriage. Respects you. She's told me many times that she hopes you and I can work things out. That's generous of her. She's a good person. Sarah, I know this whole situation is weird and painful, but she never tried to break us up or cause problems. She just wanted what was best for Emma. I wondered if David actually believed what he was saying, or if he'd told these lies so many times that he'd convinced himself they were true. Either way, he was painting Jessica as a selfless saint who had no romantic interest in him beyond co-parenting Emma. "When do you usually see them?" I asked. "Usually Tuesday evenings and some weekends. Sometimes if Jessica needs help with something urgent, but mostly it's pretty regular." I thought about the key David carried, the comfortable domesticity I'd witnessed through Jessica's window. "Where do you usually meet?" "At Jessica's house. Mostly. It's easier for Emma to be in her own space. And Jessica can't always find babysitters to meet somewhere else. And you just visit like family friends." "Pretty much. I help Emma with homework sometimes. Or we play games. Or watch movies. Normal stuff. Normal stuff. Like he belonged there. Like he was Emma's father and Jessica's partner in every way that mattered." "David, I'm proud of you for taking responsibility for Emma," I said. "I know this hasn't been easy for you, trying to do the right thing while protecting our marriage, but I think it's time to bring everything into the open. Don't you?" He nodded eagerly. "Yes, absolutely. I'm tired of feeling like I'm living a double life." "Good." I stood up and began clearing our dinner dishes. "Call Jessica tonight. Let's arrange to meet them this Saturday. The sooner we start figuring out how to make this work, the better." As I loaded the dishwasher, I thought about the recording app I'd activated on my phone before coming home. Every word of David's lies about the nature of his relationship with Jessica was now documented, ready to be compared against the evidence Michelle and I had gathered. David called Jessica from the living room, and I listened to his side of the conversation while I finished cleaning the kitchen. "Hey, it's me." "Yes, everything's okay. Actually, Sarah wants to meet you and Emma." "I know." I was surprised too. Saturday afternoon. She's been really understanding about everything. "No, Jessica. Sarah's not angry. She wants to figure out how to make this work for everyone." When David hung up, he came into the kitchen with an expression of amazed relief. "Jessica said Saturday at 2 p.m. would work. Sarah, I can't tell you how much this means to me. I was so afraid I was going to lose you." "You're not going to lose me, David, but we're going to do this right from now on. No more secrets. No more secrets." He agreed. I kissed his cheek and headed toward the bedroom. "I'm going to take a bath and get some rest. It's been an emotional few days. Sarah." I turned back to him. "I love you. More than anything. I love you too, David." As I filled the bathtub, I reflected on the evening's performance. David believed I'd forgiven his betrayal and was prepared to embrace his secret family. He had no idea that I was systematically documenting every lie he told. building a case that would ensure he lost everything when I was ready to reveal the truth. Saturday's meeting with Jessica and Emma would give me the final pieces of evidence I needed to prove that David had been living as Jessica's partner for years, not just providing occasional support to a struggling former student. And once I had that proof, David was going to discover exactly how expensive his lies had been. Saturday afternoon, I stood in front of Jessica's pale blue house holding a gift bag containing art supplies and a stuffed dragon, playing the role of the understanding wife who was graciously accepting her husband's complicated past. David had been nervous all morning, changing clothes twice and asking repeatedly if I was sure about this meeting. I'd reassured him with the patience of someone who was genuinely trying to make an impossible situation work. Now, watching David use his key to let us into Jessica's house, I felt the final piece of my understanding click into place. He didn't ring the doorbell or wait to be invited in. He walked into Jessica's home like he belonged there. "Jessica, we're here," David called out as we entered the living room I'd surveilled through the window. Jessica emerged from the kitchen wearing a sundress that made her look even younger than her 26 years. She was pretty in the effortless way of someone who had never needed to compete for attention, with long dark hair and the kind of smile that suggested someone who genuinely expected good things from life. "You must be Sarah," Jessica said, extending her hand with what appeared to be sincere warmth. "I'm Jessica. I've heard so much about you. It's nice to meet you." "Jessica." I shook her hand and studied her face for signs of discomfort or guilt. Instead, she seemed genuinely pleased to meet me, as if she'd been looking forward to this introduction. "Emma's in her room, getting ready to meet you. She's a little shy with new people, but she's very excited about the gifts David said you brought," as if summoned by her name. Emma appeared in the doorway wearing a purple dress and holding the stuffed elephant David had mentioned. She looked exactly like the photos I'd seen, but seeing her in person made the resemblance to David even more striking. She had his serious dark eyes, his thick hair, and the same unconscious way of tilting her head when she was thinking. "Emma, come meet Sarah," David said, crouching down to her level. "Sarah is my wife, and she brought you some presents." Emma approached slowly, with the cautious curiosity of a 4-year-old meeting someone important. "Are you Daddy David's other wife?" The innocent question hung in the air like a bomb. I felt David tense beside me, and Jessica's face flushed with embarrassment. "Emma, we talked about this," Jessica said quickly. "David is married to Sarah. David is your daddy, but Sarah is David's wife. But your mommy and daddy David lives here sometimes," Emma said with the logic of someone too young to understand why the adults were suddenly uncomfortable. I knelt down to Emma's level, maintaining my composure despite the revelation that David lived here sometimes. "I'm David's wife, and you're David's daughter," I said gently. "That makes us family too, doesn't it?" Emma considered this seriously, then nodded. "Can I see my presents?" I handed her the gift bag and watched as her face lit up with delight at the art supplies and dragon plushie. She immediately hugged the dragon and declared its name was Sparkles. "What do you say to Sarah?" Jessica prompted, "Thank you." Emma threw her small arms around my neck in an impulsive hug that caught me completely off guard. For a moment, I felt the genuine warmth of this little girl who had done nothing wrong except be born into a complicated situation. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and had David's same habit of humming unconsciously when she was happy. "You're very welcome, Emma," I said. Jessica invited us to sit in the living room while Emma played with her new art supplies on the coffee table. The conversation was awkward but polite, with Jessica asking about my work and me asking about her job at the biotechnology lab. "I'm really grateful that you're being so understanding about everything," Jessica said. "I know this situation isn't easy for anyone, but Emma loves David so much. She's never known any other father. Children need stability." I agreed. "It sounds like you've done a wonderful job raising Emma." Jessica glanced at David with obvious affection. "David's been amazing. I don't know what Emma and I would have done without his support all these years." All these years. I kept my voice neutral, curious rather than suspicious. "Well, David's been part of Emma's life since she was born," Jessica said. "He was at the hospital when Emma was born. Actually, he cut her umbilical cord." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. David had been present at Emma's birth, had performed the symbolic act of cutting the umbilical cord. This wasn't a reluctant acceptance of responsibility. This was him choosing to be present for one of the most intimate moments of Jessica's life. "That must have been special," I said. "It was incredible," David said quietly. "I'd never experienced anything like that before." The words hit me like a physical blow. He'd experienced the birth of his child, the moment I dreamed about sharing with him for years. While I was grieving our miscarriage, he'd been cutting another woman's baby's umbilical cord. "David, you never told me you were there when Emma was born," I said. He shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't think. It seemed like something that might hurt you. Given everything we were going through, Daddy David brings me books every week," Emma announced from her spot on the floor. "And Daddy David makes the best pancakes. Every week." I asked. "Emma exaggerates," Jessica said quickly. "David comes by when he can, but he has his own life, his own responsibilities." But Emma continued talking with the honesty of someone too young to filter information. "Daddy David sleeps here sometimes when the monsters come. And Daddy David has clothes in Mommy's closet." The room went very quiet. I looked at David, whose face had gone pale. "Emma, why don't you show Sarah your room?" Jessica suggested with obvious desperation. "Okay, come see my room." "He's Sarah." Daddy David painted it purple because that's my favorite color. I followed Emma down the hallway, noting the family photos on the walls that included David in nearly every frame. In Emma's room, I saw his handiwork everywhere: carefully painted walls, assembled furniture, glow-in-the-dark stars arranged on the ceiling in actual constellation patterns. "Daddy David knows all about stars," Emma said proudly. "He teaches me about space." I looked around the room that David had clearly spent dozens of hours preparing for his daughter. This wasn't the occasional involvement he'd described. This was the dedication of a father who was intimately involved in every aspect of Emma's life. When we returned to the living room, I found David and Jessica sitting closer together on the couch, her hand resting on his arm in a gesture of casual intimacy. "Emma has a beautiful room," I said. "David, you did wonderful work on those constellation patterns." "Thank you." "Emma loves astronomy. How often are you here working on projects like that?" David and Jessica exchanged a look that confirmed everything I needed to know. "Sarah," Jessica said carefully, "I think maybe David and I should explain our situation more clearly." "I'd appreciate that." Jessica took a deep breath. "David and we're not just co-parents. We're partners. We love each other. And we've been building a life together for the past 4 years. David spends 3 or 4 nights a week here. He has clothes here. He helps pay the mortgage. His name is on Emma's emergency contact forms at daycare." I looked at David, who was staring at his hands. "Is that true?" "David, Sarah, I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. You and I have been together for so long. And I didn't want to hurt you. But Jessica and Emma, they're my family too. Your family too. I repeated. I love you, Sarah. I always have, but I also love Jessica and Emma. I know that's not fair to you. I know it's selfish, but I couldn't choose between you. I stood up slowly, processing this final confirmation of what I'd already suspected. David hadn't made a mistake with a former student he'd been living a double life for years, maintaining 2 relationships, 2 homes, 2 completely different versions of himself. So when you come home to our apartment and tell me you love me, you've usually come from here where you told Jessica and Emma the same thing. It's not the same thing, David. Stop. My voice was calm but final. Just stop lying, please. I turned to Jessica, who was watching this exchange with growing alarm. Jessica, did you know David was still telling me he loved me? Did you know he was still sleeping in our bed, still planning a future with me? Jessica's face crumpled. David said your marriage was over emotionally, that you were just staying together for practical reasons. He said you both knew it wasn't working but hadn't figured out how to separate yet. He told you we were basically separated. He said you were more like roommates than spouses. I looked between David and Jessica, seeing the full scope of his deception. He'd lied to both women, telling each of us what we needed to hear to accept his divided loyalties. Emma, I said gently, can you go play in your room for a few minutes? The grown-ups need to talk. After Emma reluctantly left the room, I turned back to David and Jessica. David, I need you to understand something very clearly. Our marriage is over. Not because of Emma, not because of Jessica, but because you've been lying to me for 5 years about the most fundamental aspects of your life. Sarah, please, and Jessica, I need you to understand that he's been lying to you too. David and I were actively trying to have a baby as recently as last month. He never told me our marriage was over. He's been telling both of us exactly what we needed to hear to keep both relationships going. Jessica looked at David with dawning horror. David, is that true? His silence was answer enough. I picked up my purse and walked toward the front door. I'll be filing for divorce next week. David, you can stay here tonight and figure out what you want to tell our friends and family about why our marriage ended. Sarah, wait, goodbye. David, goodbye. Jessica. Emma, it was lovely meeting you. I walked out of Jessica's house and got into my car, where I sat for several minutes processing what had just happened. David had been caught in lies to both women simultaneously, and there was no way for him to explain or minimize what Jessica and I had just learned. My phone buzzed with a text from Michelle. How did it go? I typed back, better than I hoped. I'll tell you everything tonight. As I drove away from Jessica's house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete clarity about my future. David had chosen to live a lie, and now he would face the consequences of that choice. Tomorrow, I would begin the legal process of ending our marriage and reclaiming the life he'd stolen from me through 5 years of systematic deception. But tonight, I was going to celebrate the fact that I was finally free. Attorney Williams had the kind of office that suggested both competence and expense floor-to-ceiling law books, a view of Elliott Bay, and a mahogany desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. I sat across from her with a folder containing 5 years of documented evidence and a very clear understanding of what I wanted. Next, Chen, I've reviewed all the materials you provided. Attorney Williams said, adjusting her reading glasses. The financial records, The photographs, the recorded conversations, this is one of the most thoroughly documented cases of marital deception I've seen in 20 years of practice. What are my options, given that you and Mr. Chen signed a prenuptial agreement that specifically addresses adultery? Your position is very strong. The agreement states that if either party engages in extramarital relationships, the unfaithful spouse forfeits any claim to marital assets. I nodded. I'd insisted on the prenuptial agreement when David and I married, partly because my income was significantly higher than his, and partly because my mother had drilled into me the importance of protecting myself financially. However, Attorney Williams continued, there's an additional complication that works in your favor. Mr. Chen has been using marital funds to support his relationship with Mrs. Martinez and their child in Washington state. That constitutes financial infidelity, essentially theft of marital assets. What does that mean practically? It means Mr. Chen owes you restitution for every dollar he spent on his extramarital family based on your documentation. That appears to be approximately $37,000 over 5 years. I felt a grim satisfaction. David had minimized the amount when I confronted him, claiming it was only $20,000 to $25,000. The actual total was significantly higher. There's also the matter of Mr. Chen's employment, Attorney Williams said carefully. The relationship with Miss Martinez began when she was his student, while she was of legal age. There are professional ethics issues that could affect Mr. Chen's teaching career. I'm aware of that. Mrs. Chen, I have to ask, are you prepared for the collateral damage this divorce might cause? Mr. Chen could lose his job, his reputation, his ability to work in education. Miss Martinez and her daughter could face financial hardship if Mr. Chen can no longer support them. I thought about Emma's innocent questions about Daddy David's other wife, about the 5 years I'd spent believing I was the problem in our marriage, about the baby I'd terminated rather than bring a child into David's web of lies. Attorney Williams, my husband made choices that led to this situation. I'm not responsible for protecting him from the consequences of those choices. Understood. How would you like to proceed? I want the maximum settlement the prenuptial agreement allows. I want restitution for all marital funds spent on his affair, and I want this resolved as quickly as possible. We can file the papers this week, given the strength of your evidence and the prenuptial agreement. I don't expect Mr. Chen's attorney to mount much of a defense. After the meeting, I drove to Pinnacle Global's Seattle office, where I had a very different conversation with my boss, Regional Director Patricia Chang. Sarah, I have to say, I'm disappointed to hear about your personal situation, but I'm not entirely surprised by your request, Patricia said as we sat in her corner office overlooking the financial district. You're not surprised. You've been one of our strongest performers for 6 years. But I've watched you turn down opportunities that would have required travel or relocation. I always assumed it was because of family obligations. I felt a pang of regret for all the career opportunities I declined to accommodate David's teaching schedule and our theoretical plans for children. The position in London is still available, I asked. Very much so. We need someone to head up our European marketing expansion. And frankly, you're overqualified for the role. It would be a significant promotion, Director of International Marketing. Substantial salary increase, full relocation package. When would I need to start? The position needs to be filled by January. That gives you about 6 weeks to wrap up your life here, which should be plenty of time given your changing circumstances. I smiled. Patricia, I'd like to formally accept the position. Excellent. Sarah, I think this is exactly what you need, a fresh start somewhere. David can't complicate your life. That evening, I met Michelle at our favorite wine bar in Belltown. She'd been following the divorce proceedings with the fascination of someone watching a perfectly executed chess match. So you're moving to London, Michelle said, raising her glass of Prosecco. That's incredibly exciting. It feels like the right choice. I need distance from this situation, and London will give me the chance to build something entirely my own. What about David? How is he handling everything? My phone had been buzzing with increasingly desperate messages from David for the past week. Ever since I'd served him with divorce papers at Lincoln High School in front of 3 of his colleagues, David's trying to negotiate. His lawyer contacted Attorney Williams about a settlement that would let him keep some assets in exchange for not pursuing the professional ethics violations. Are you considering it? No, my voice was firm. He spent 5 years lying to me about the most fundamental aspects of his life. He used my money to build a relationship with another woman while telling me we couldn't afford fertility treatments. He made me feel like I was the problem in our marriage while he was playing house with someone else. I pulled out my phone and showed Michelle the latest text from David. Sarah, please reconsider. Jessica and Emma will lose the house if I can't support them. I know I hurt you, but please don't destroy innocent people because you're angry at me. The audacity, Michelle said after reading the message. He's trying to make you responsible for the consequences of his own choices. He still doesn't understand that this isn't about anger. This is about justice. My phone rang with a call from an unknown number. I answered it, putting the call on speaker so Michelle could hear, "Is this Sarah Chen?" The voice was young, nervous. "This is Sarah. I'm in the process of changing my name back. This is Jessica. Could we talk in person?" Michelle and I exchanged glances. "What would you like to talk about?" "Jessica." "About David." "About what's happening." I think there are things you should know." An hour later, Jessica and I sat across from each other in a quiet coffee shop in Wallingford. She looked like she hadn't been sleeping, with dark circles under her eyes and the pale complexion of someone under severe stress. "Thank you for meeting me," Jessica said. "I know you don't owe me anything, but I needed to talk to someone who understands what David is capable of." "What do you mean?" Jessica pulled out a manila folder and slid it across the table. "I've been going through 5 years of text messages, emails, financial records. I wanted to understand how much David lied to me, and I found a lot." I opened the folder and found printouts of text exchanges between David and Jessica, bank statements, and what appeared to be a timeline written in Jessica's handwriting. "David told me you knew about Emma from the beginning," Jessica said. "He said you were okay with him helping us financially because you felt guilty about not being able to have children." I looked up from the papers. "He told you I knew about Emma for 3 years. He said you were supportive of his relationship with Emma, that you encouraged him to be a good father figure. He said you just weren't ready to meet us yet because it was emotionally difficult for you." "Jessica, I found out about Emma's existence 2 weeks ago." Her face crumpled. "I was afraid of that. After our meeting, after seeing how shocked you were, I knew he'd been lying to me too." I continued reading through Jessica's documentation. The financial records showed that David had been spending even more money than I'd discovered, nearly $50,000 over 5 years. Not the $37,000 Attorney Williams had calculated. "There's something else," Jessica said quietly. "David's been telling people at his school that he's separated from you, that the divorce is mutual. He's been dating another teacher there, someone named Amanda Richardson. I felt the room spin slightly. He's been dating someone else for about 6 months, according to the text messages I found. He told Amanda the same story he told me, that his marriage was over emotionally, and he was just waiting for the right time to formalize the separation. Jessica slid another phone across the table. This is David's old phone. He left it at my house and got a new one, but he never deleted anything from this one. The messages with Amanda are all there. I scrolled through months of romantic texts between David and a woman named Amanda Richardson. Photos of romantic dinners, plans for weekend getaways, messages that clearly indicated a sexual relationship. How many of us are there? I asked quietly. I think just the 3 of us, but I can't be sure. He compartmentalized everything so carefully. I never suspected you, and I never suspected Amanda. I looked at this young woman who had been just as deceived as I had been, who was now facing the collapse of the life she thought she'd been building with David. Jessica, what are you going to do? I'm moving back to Portland to live with my sister. I can't afford the house without David's help, and I can't trust anything he tells me anymore. She paused. Sarah, I want you to know that I never would have gotten involved with David if I'd known he was lying to you. I thought I was in a relationship with someone who was honest about his situation. You were 21. Jessica, David was your teacher, someone you trusted. What he did to you was as wrong as what he did to me. Jessica started crying then, and I felt an unexpected surge of sympathy for this woman who had been manipulated just as thoroughly as I had been. Jessica, can I give you some advice? She nodded. Don't let David convince you that any of this is your fault. He's a master manipulator who told each of us exactly what we needed to hear to keep us under his control. You deserve better than that. And so does Emma. After Jessica left, I sat in the coffee shop reviewing the additional evidence she'd provided. David hadn't just been living a double life. He'd been living a triple life, maintaining relationships with 3 different women by lying systematically to all of them. I called Attorney Williams from the coffee shop. I have additional evidence, I said when the attorney answered. A lot more financial records. And proof that David has been in a relationship with a 3rd woman. Mrs. Kim, this changes everything. We're not just talking about adultery anymore. We're talking about a pattern of fraud and deception that could have criminal implications. What do you recommend? I recommend we pursue the maximum possible settlement and make sure Mr. Chen understands that any attempt to contest these proceedings will result in criminal charges being filed. I hung up the phone and felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Complete peace about my decisions. David had created a web of lies so complex that even he probably couldn't keep track of all the deceptions. Now that web was collapsing, and everyone he'd hurt was finally seeing him clearly. In 6 weeks, I would be in London, starting a new life with a prestigious job and the hard-won knowledge that I was strong enough to survive anything. David would be facing the consequences of 5 years of lies, 3 betrayed women, and the loss of everything he'd built through deception. Justice, I reflected, sometimes took time to arrive. But when it finally came, it was thorough,